Good morning. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive. We're in the 11 o'clock hour, and this is Wednesday, June 24th. We're having our COVID conversation this morning to talk a little bit about what's happening with the pandemic in Westchester County as affects some of our local areas. Today our guest is the town supervisor for the town of Lewisburg, the Honorable Peter Parsons. Peter, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Peter is head of a town that's in the northeastern quadrant of the county, and for those who may be watching that come from Yonkers or New Rochelle or even from Peekskill, Lewisburg is an interesting town. I guess you could describe what it looks like, but it goes east-west, and then it has a portion that goes to the southeast, bordering Connecticut, and quite a bit of different distance from Vista to Golden's Bridge.
Yes, one of the things one has to be worried about in my job, we normally have one cop on duty at a time. Mm-hmm. And the distance from what we call Deep Vista to Golden's Bridge, you just hope that when you need a cop, he is not in Golden's Bridge and you are.
Right. I've looked at once at the structure of Lewisburg, and I placed it in other parts of the county, and in essence you're driving from Mamaroneck to Dobbs Ferry or Mamaroneck to Tarrytown in the same kind of equivalent. But you've served now a couple of terms. Peter was a contemporary, not quite, of Don Draper on Madison Avenue in the advertising industry. A little younger than the Don Draper character, but you have a little madman in the background, which I think is terrific experience to be a town supervisor because you're constantly having to sell ideas and concepts and budgets and so forth. But you and I both, in our respective responsibilities, we were sailing along on Moonlight Bay, and then we get indication that there's a virus over the seas in China, and now it's in Italy, and next thing we know, it's in our backyard. Tell me a little bit about how the town government of Lewisburg had to respond to the pandemic as it evolved locally.
Well, first of all, we very quickly moved everybody out of the offices and into their homes, with the exception of highway and maintenance. And everybody else operated out of with their homes. It so happens we have the same telephone system as you, I think, LightPath. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you can just pick up your phone, walk home with it, plug it in, and it rings on your office number.
Right.
And that's great. Now, in terms of the town itself, people missed restaurants and bars most of all. That was the biggest impact, I think, on the people. Everybody was a bit worried. Quite honestly, one store took the lead on opening at, I think, 7 in the morning, 6 or 7 in the morning for seniors.
Right.
And allowing only seniors in, and that was excellent. I've got a great volunteer emergency manager out of the Marine Corps. The only problem is he acts a little like a Marine. Hey, you there! Being ex-Army myself, admittedly a different Army, I find it funny, but not everybody does.
Right. It's an acquired taste.
It's an acquired taste. But Adam Oakes has done a magnificent job during this of encouraging mask wearing, encouraging people to clean the doorknobs, having any bathroom that's being used thoroughly disinfected, all of that kind of stuff he has taken care of. I have been kept with a ample supply of face masks, gloves, disinfectant, and everything else. So the town itself managed to escape the worst of the virus.
Right. And you're a fairly low density community. How many people in Lewisburg altogether?
13,800, I think. And that we're spread out, as you just pointed out. It's a long town. The thing that worried me the most was we have 5 group homes. Mm-hmm. And I was scared that if it got loose in one of these homes, we would have a real problem. In fact, we had a bit of a problem in Four Winds Hospital, but Four Winds responded excellently,
Right.
and set up isolation wards and everything else, and that was held within reason. And of the group homes, only one, as far as I know, had any problem at all, and that was minuscule. I mean, it had one person, I think.
Right.
But I was very worried when I read they'd got one person. I said, oh my gosh, it's going to go throughout the group
I think
home.
that was a concern all of us had, and it did happen in certain nursing homes.
I know.
As well as institutional. So the governor establishes his executive orders. There's a shutdown all across the board. It happens in your town and every place else in this county and other counties. Now we've gone through a period of time where the contagion has receded, at least for the moment. We hope it's permanent, but we don't know if it's permanent. So now becomes the reopening part. Phase 1 opens up, construction projects, manufacturing. I doubt there's much manufacturing in Lewisburg. We go to the second phase now, where you can have outdoor dining, and I got my haircut. Barbershops open, a few other places open, and now as we're speaking today, phase 3 happens. So now folks can actually go inside, I guess, Le Chateau and whatever else represents some of your terrific dining opportunities. Has that started the process of turning the town back on?
Yes, because almost every restaurant, or let's go back, every really good restaurant in town has got sufficient room outside to open outside dining.
Okay.
So although you can't go into the restaurant, I think you can begin to go in today.
Well, yes, as of this Tuesday,
Yeah.
you could start having indoor capacity.
But they have been doing the weather has cooperated,
Right.
and they've been doing a thriving business in outside dining, which I'm very pleased about, because I was scared about these, one of these restaurants going under.
Sure.
In addition, we are now reopening our preserves. That sounds weird almost down here, but in Lewisburg, the preserves are one of the big things. We've got a preserve called Leon Levy, which we had to essentially close.
And these are places where you can go hiking.
Yes, sorry, by
pleasant
preserves,
walk.
they're hiking.
Yeah, right.
Leon Levy happens to be particularly beautiful, and it's got a big parking lot, or a reasonable sized parking lot, but suddenly we had Route 123 blocked almost by people parking in order to go in.
Right.
So we had to close it. I guess the biggest thing I've been working on, together with a lady named Dana Maitland, is as soon as we realized that we were going to begin to reopen, we worked on reopening camp.
Right.
Because we knew that there were a lot of parents who essentially, people think of Lewisburg as wealthy. Yes, some of it is, but a good deal of it isn't.
Right.
And those people, both parents have jobs. Both parents need to get back to work.
Right.
And they really need a day camp. So Dana and I have worked very hard on getting camp. Camp was fully booked within, I think, half an hour
It's amazing, huh?
of bookings
We saw
opening.
the same thing from the county day camps too. We made the decision roughly 2 weeks ago to open day camps after the 4th of July weekend. It went like that. The Muscoot camp for us. Trailside we have a little bit different strategy with. But in every one of those cases there was this instant demand, and I assume that's what you saw as
Yes,
well.
instant demand. Now this wasn't a surprise because everybody was calling us
Right.
and saying, about, I would say 20% of the calls on my phone were, when are you going to open day camp?
Right.
Another 10% were, when are you going to open the pool?
Right.
I think we're going to begin to take pool memberships at the end of this week on the 28th, I think. There are some pretty strict rules on that.
And we're facing that with the county pools as well. These are for the people who may not, the governmental inside baseball of towns, cities, villages, and counties. It's great, is that the state has really established protocols, And then we, as local governments, where we have municipal pools, countywide pools, we have to implement the management of those things. And it's not quite as a snap of the finger situations. There are logistical difficulties. For example, in our case, we, instead of having open pool all day long, we close it for an hour in the middle of the day so we can go in and sanitize everything, which, sort of is disjointed for the person's going to the pool all day with the kids, scenario. Peter, let me ask a bit of a different question tied to your geography. From Route 35 all the way down to Vista, you border Connecticut.
Yes.
How much of the decisions being made in Connecticut to open things or whatever affected the pressure on you in Lewisburg? You couldn't act off of it, but was that a pressure point that your neighbors in Connecticut were doing something?
It was a real pressure point. I mean, you are a hardware store, and everybody is going across the border. And you call me and say, what the hell are you doing? Right. Why don't you get your act together and get me open? And that was true of a range of stores, which was unfortunate. And I just had to basically say that's how it is. Mm. I think I also bleated to you at one stage.
Right, yeah, we've had these conversations. Yeah. You may have seen this alluded to, and I've talked to other local towns, city or village leaders in a variety of forums. We had now twice, it was 3 times a week, municipal calls where Peter and his colleagues would be on the phone with our executive team here at the county. We may be a bigger government than the town, but we are also a local government. We're just a bigger, we're like the largest, we're the oldest son in a family, and we're all kids. And the decisions are being made, by the governor, based on the priorities that he's laid down. But when we are next door to another state, and I live, 25 miles from you, but I'm also a couple of, in essence, a couple of blocks away from the Connecticut border. My hair was getting shaggy, and I could have had it cut in Greenwich, but I wanted to wait to go to my barber, and not have to cross the dotted line.
Yeah, we border New Canaan, Wilton, and obviously Ridgefield.
Ridgefield, yeah.
And that's quite a lot. Right. The one thing when we're talking about camps and pools, I'd like to thank Peter DeLucia on your staff.
And he's a Lewisburg board.
Yeah, because
served on the town board.
We had a small advantage there that he knows the town like the back of his hand. Right. But he really helped us on opening the camp and the pool.
Peter is one of our senior leaders in the Department of Health. If you have been following the series of things, he was the individual that showed me officially how to wash your hands about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, in one of these videos, which was what my mother told me 60 years ago. I didn't pay attention then, but I paid attention to Peter this time because I knew it was important.
No, Peter was my deputy for my first 4 terms.
Okay, very good. So we're coming back to something like normal, but it's not going to be it's going to be a new normal. It's not going to be the old normal. What are some of the things in running the town that is or will be different in the way you operate because we have these new rules and requirements? Even as we open things, we open them a bit differently.
I think, first of all, we are not allowing people into buildings except by appointment. Our customers or our residents.
So if I have to come pay taxes, if I have to come to get a permit for something, I need to call and make an appointment.
Yes, or alternatively, you get the application online. It's amazing how much can really be done without seeing the individual.
Right.
You can, get the application online. You can fill it in. You can put it in the mailbox at the townhouse or at one of the other buildings.
Right.
And lo and behold, the next day it's there at it's delivered by the Postal Service to your house. It's not really that hard.
Right.
Now that's a bit harder on the building department, when you need permits and you got plans and the building inspector points out, yes, but this plan is no darn good.
Right.
And
there has to be a give and take between the individual and the person within the government.
And planning is going to be more.
Right.
But most of the rest of what we do is pretty pro forma. Maybe you need a telephone call as well as the piece of paper.
Right.
But that normally, it's amazing how well people have adapted to a no physical meeting situation. What we haven't reopened yet, because it hasn't been reopened, is the court.
Mm-hmm.
Now, our traffic court is big, normally.
We got 684 that comes through your town. So.
Yeah, there's also a route called 35.
I've heard of it.
And it's perfectly normal to have that when our traffic court will have 100 people.
Right.
It's going to be interesting how we manage to handle that going back, because they're not even talking about reopening traffic court at the moment. Right. Criminal, yes. We'll get that under control first, but that never was very crowded in Lewisburg.
Right. Let me ask a question in the time we have left, briefly. The state has a major budget problem now, given their circumstances. The county, I've been very clear that we've lost significant revenue. At the low end, initially $180 million worth of sales tax revenue and other revenues that won't materialize. And we're obviously all trying to figure out how do we close that gap responsibly and with the least amount of impact to service and people. What are you facing right now in general terms within your town, budget-wise?
I have asked my controller to tell us all at the next board meeting. But in fact, it's really a question of what the fall has got in store for us.
Right.
Because so far, most of what we've received is money that was made or spent before the virus really hit.
Right.
What scares me a bit is I think we're due to make another payment to you coming up.
October. Right.
Yeah. And I've got to make sure we've got the money to do it, because I think you'd like it.
We're all pivoted on
and what
the
we
revenues.
Don't know yet, and this is rather scary, is how many people are going to pay their real estate taxes.
Right.
Because we moved the date to July 15th,
right.
Normally by now we'd know.
Yeah.
But this year we don't know. We know that we're rather behind what we would have hoped in terms of the percentage who paid. I think we're still down in the 80s. We'd prefer to be at 97%.
Which is usually what we would have in a situation like now. The the unfortunate reality is that most of our governments operate on two major streams of revenue, sales tax and property taxes. Sales tax oscillates with whatever's happening in the society, and what happened in the society got shut down and still to this day is not fully opened back. And so that now makes us lean on the property taxes as an absolute. And while they generally come in close to the target number, the people who are without work, the people who have small businesses that are impacted or make a wonder, they're less ability to pay.
What I'm hoping is that some of the people who haven't paid are just canny. I own a shopping center. I'm wealthy as sin. But the shopping center has been bringing in virtually no revenue and is a separate corporation.
Right.
So I plead hardship based on for that corporation and delay paying my taxes. Why not? I'm allowed to.
Right. Then you have money that, depending on how you invest it, could float and generate some resources for you. We're just about ready to wrap up. This sounds like such a lightweight question, but you live in and love Lewisboro. What makes you love Lewisboro so much? Tell your fellow Westchester neighbors what makes Lewisboro such a great place to live.
I love Lewisboro because of the preserves. I happen to love hiking in our preserves, and that includes the county preserves. The county's got two huge preserves, which are partially at least in Lewisboro. That's one thing. Secondly, we've got our friends there, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And as you get older, where your friends are is very important.
Right.
I've got grandchildren in Ridgefield and grandchildren in Chappaqua. I'm in the middle. That works pretty well. Finally, I happen to be very fond of our library, which I was president of for some time. And I think it's a magnificent library and a magnificent institution. And those are the things that affect me personally. Now, there are a lot of people who would not mention any of those.
Right.
But two of my biggest achievements in this job are to get the town out of the way of the library so they could rebuild.
Right.
Because we'd been causing chaos with some of our decision making. And secondly, to get Leon Levy up to the standard where it currently is.
We've been talking with Peter Parsons, who's the town supervisor for the town of Lewisburg, one of the 25 towns and cities in Westchester County. I've enjoyed being with you for the fair. Very early in the year, we had a couple of Eagle Scout Courts of Honors that we were together for, and then some of the other community events, and I look forward to being there with you more in the remaining time that we have together. Peter, thank you for coming on with us today. And we hope that you enjoy the series of conversations we're having with the different communities. I believe tomorrow we'll be talking with Linda Puglisi, who's the town supervisor for the town of Cortland. And as you've seen over these different days, in some cases we're out in the community, as we were yesterday with Rick Morrissey in Somers and in some of the other locations. But Westchester is a very diverse place, and wherever you live right now, wherever you may have grown up outside of the county, if you grew up here in the county, it's a wonderful county to investigate. And now that it's starting to open up, some of these preserves, these nature preserves that Peter's talking about, are worth your time and effort to find. Up at 684, get off on Route 35 at exit 6. 35, you can go right through the heart of the northern portion of Lewisboro, and you'll see these hamlets of Cross River and South Salem. Lovely area to come visit, and I hope you will. I'm George Latimer. We'll be back at 2 o'clock for our coronavirus official update. We'll give the statistics about where we are with the virus outbreak and spread, and we'll talk a little bit, too, about some of the economic efforts we're trying to make to help our local businesses. In the meantime, take care, and we'll see you at 2 o'clock.
Thank you, George.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much.